Cash flow, it is so important. It is the lifeblood of your business, and if you don't have good cash flow, you're going to struggle.
If we're not growing, you're not growing.
Hey guys, Nathan Rigney here, the profit generator, owner of NGR Accounting, and I am a profit first professional. I'm certified to help you turn your business around to become a more profitable business. Today we're talking about cash flow, talking about revenue and all the things that you need to know to make sure that you have a healthy business and that you're not going to struggle and have to close your business because the end result of bad cash flow. Why is cash flow so important? Guys, if you don't have healthy cash coming in, going out, or mostly coming in so that you can pay things to go out, what's going to happen is if you don't have healthy cash coming in, all the expenses you have to go out and pay will eventually pile up and then it will all fall in, and unfortunately you'll become basically what we'd call insolvent. So insolvent basically means that you can't pay your debts on time, and it's really bad. It's something that you shouldn't do. Like, you basically, if you're insolvent, you shouldn't be operating your business, and that's actually a law here in Australia. A few things I just want to go over. Okay, so let's talk about maybe the difference between, say for example, cash and revenue, because they're two different things. Revenue is the sales that you're going to make. It's the cash coming in the business. But when we talk about cash flow, it's more about the cash coming in, it's the cash going out. It's the two movements together that we refer to as cash flow. And a healthy business needs a healthy cash flow. It needs to be positive. At times it can be negative, and when I say negative, it means basically your short-term debts or money that you have to pay out is more than the money you're bringing in. And it depends on the type of business you have. That can be quite normal, but you need systems in place to make sure that you can deal with those instances where it may be negative. But cash flow, liquidity is another way to talk about cash flow, and liquidity is all about how quickly you can convert your sales into cash, and then if there's anything that you need to sell, any assets, stock, how quickly we can turn that into cash. And then it's all about we look at liquidity, we look at basically the short-term income you're bringing in and then liabilities that you're going to have to pay. And it's really important that you have good liquidity, you have good cash flow coming in, because if you're going to have expenses that you need to pay quite often that are regular, and that could be something as simple as payroll, it could be rent, but there's those guaranteed expenses that you're going to have every month. And if you have poor liquidity or poor cash flow, it's very likely that you're not going to be able to pay those items, and therefore if you're not paying your rent on time, eventually the landlord's going to throw you out, or if you're not paying your staff, they're not going to turn up next week. So it's important to have good cash flow so that you can pay those expenses for your business. And I guess when we talk about cash flow, what I see is a struggle that people tend to have when it comes to cash flow is not having a system in place to manage the cash coming in. And it's really important. Every part of your business has systems, and when managing your cash, you need a system there as well, which is why I always talk about the profit first system and recommend that, because that is a system that helps you look at what cash is coming in the short term so that then you can survive the long term. So it's so important to implement something like profit first, or a version of whatever that might be, to manage your cash so that you can continue operating. I guess common problems that we often see for medium-sized businesses can be a little bit different to a small and a large business. Small businesses have different issues, and every size business has its own issues. But for a medium-sized business, in my opinion, face bigger challenges when it comes to managing cash. If you're a business that's between $2 to $10 million, you're a medium-sized business. And often as you get bigger and you take on bigger projects, you have delayed payments from clients, customers, or whoever's got the project that you're basically dealing with. It's really important that when you are a business and you're taking on bigger projects, you have a bit more of a system around how you manage the cash flow coming in, so you don't get yourself into cash flow bottlenecks. If the project is, say, $2 or $3 million of turnover coming in, or revenue, you need to think about how often am I going to get paid, and then what is the consequence of how much cash are you outlaying for your employees, supplies, or other items. It's also very important that before you even get into the project, that you have a good idea as to what cash expenses you're going to have. And then even particularly, I would say the biggest thing that you should do is a credit check and understand who you're getting into business with. And it is so common that we see as accountants, and particularly liquidators, where we have good businesses, medium-sized businesses, probably just like your own, where you've taken on a project and you think, this is great, it's a really good job that I can take on, and then it turns into a nightmare because you find out that the company you're getting the project from, that you're working on as maybe a contractor or a part of a project, so that might be, for example, you're an electrician or you're a plumber and you're doing one part of a big project. That could be a rebuild on a building or something like that. But if you find that the builder who overall has the contract has bad credit, doing that quick, simple credit check before you go into business and take on that project, it's really important to have a look and see who you're dealing with. So if you can see that, hey, they've got a really bad credit file, and this could be something, a credit check could basically tell you previous history of the directors. Have they gone into administration before, or have they gone into liquidation? Has their business fallen over? Have they gone out of business? Or are they late on payments? Have other people they've dealt with put demands on them to make payments, suppliers, so many things that you need to look at. And then if you see they've got a bad credit check, then you've got to question twice, do I want to get into business with these guys and do this work? Because what ultimately could happen is if they've got bad credit check or bad systems and they're bad financially managing their own cash flow, you're going to have that flow-on effect in your own business. And you're not going to find out until it's too late, when most likely you've done all the work in the project, you've paid all the employees, and then all your suppliers that you've supplied for the job, and if they've gone into administration, the business has gone out, or they're just not paying you, it's very hard to recoup that money. And often what we do see, especially with our tradie clients, is that a big builder will come through and they will say, hey, we're going to change the invoice and we're not going to pay you as much. So you really want to know who you're dealing with, because you don't want to get in that position where a builder or someone's not paying you for the work that you've invested in, and then you want to get a profit out of. So as much as doing a credit check and knowing and doing your due diligence and understanding who you're working with, it's so important to do that so that you don't have these delayed payments and you don't have negative cash flow, because these are all things that can basically get you into a position where you don't have enough cash, and it can actually put a massive dampener and actually even ruin probably your own business. And it's this domino effect. Think about any job you're doing, particularly if you've got, in general in your business, you really want to do a cash flow forecast, but then particularly if you're doing projects, if you're taking on a project where it might be a $3 million project and you've got a smaller little jobs over here, even that project wants its own flow forecasts. And I guess all you want to do in a cash flow forecast is we'll say, hey, what are our upfront costs? What are our costs over the lifetime of the project? So if we assume the project's going for 4 months, what costs are there? So you think about, well, the suppliers maybe, and then how long do you have to pay the suppliers that you've purchased? How often is the contract going to pay you? What are their terms? How do they pay you 90 days after you do an invoice, or is it immediately? What is it? But understanding what that is, because then you can put that in your cash flow forecast. Understand, am I going to be short up until a certain point? If, say, for example, we have a look at it and the project goes for 4 months and they're not paying you until maybe you're getting progress payments, but maybe they're not paying everything until the end. You might even have what we call retention payments in there, where they withhold maybe 7 to 10% of your total invoices until a year after all the work's been done. So they want to go, well, hey, we need insurance that as a retention payment. The work that you've done is good up to a certain point. So we're not going to pay you everything until we know that everything is definitely good and there's no future issues with the work that you've done. These are all things you've got to put into your forecast, and you've got to have a look at it and see how much cash do I have at the end of every month for that project. And if you're hitting in the negative up until maybe a certain point, at the end you should be having a profit and there should be a big inflow of cash at the end. But it's really important to see every month, how much cash am I going to have at the end of the month? And if it's negative, you need to make sure before you go into that project that you have that capital, you have that cash put aside for that part of the project, so that you're not living on the poverty line in your business, where you're paying everyone else, but you're not getting paid yourself, because ultimately that's what happens, right? I see this all the time. Business owners going into a big contract and they're paying everyone else, but they live on the poverty line until the end of the contract, and then they live like a king at the end. So what you want to do is you really want to have an understanding of how much cash is outgoing. Is the project going to be negative for the first few months? And then what amount then do I need to put aside at the start, so that then we have basically at least neutral cash flow throughout the project. So if you do get yourself in a position where you're not doing any cash flow, you're going to have financial forecasting. And unfortunately, without a good forecast, without planning what cash needs to go out, what expenses you're going to have, and even what cash is coming in, what's going to happen is you're going to get blindsided with sudden expenses and just costs and cash that's going out, cash that's coming in that you didn't expect. Planning is so important. Whether you're doing a project or you're even just overall for the whole year, you need to have a look and understand how much cash is coming into the business and how much cash is going out, to make sure it's always positive. You don't want to be in a position where you have negative cash, where maybe the credit cards, are racked up where you can't pay them back, or there's no cash in the business for you to go and pay suppliers. If you don't pay suppliers, eventually what happens? Suppliers will not give you any additional suppliers in the future because you've got bad credit rating, you're not paying them on time. So it's so important to look at cash flow, forecast it, get an idea of what cash is coming in and going out for the period, whatever project that you're doing, so that you don't get yourself in a position where you are stressed, you have anxiety, and wishing you didn't take the project on board. So I had to sum it up. Do a credit check, do your due diligence, know who you're getting into when it comes to doing a project or doing any work with anyone, especially as your business gets bigger, projects get bigger, but then liabilities get bigger too, and the risks that you take on get bigger as well. Do your research, do your planning, understand what's happening, and then you're less likely to have issues when it comes to cash flow in the future, and then even worst case scenario, finding yourself in a position where you need to maybe look at liquidating or maybe going into something like the small business restructure program. Profit First is a great way to basically deal with cash flow issues. So many businesses out there have cash flow issues, and the reason they've got cash flow issues is because they don't have any system or process when it comes to understanding what cash they've got coming in the business and what cash is going out. You really got to put a priority around, a plan around how you're working or how you're managing cash in your business. And there's a few things that I would say. If you want to implement Profit First, there are a few basic things you can do before you get right into it. Some really simple stuff. And then even just in general, this is really good stuff that you can do. First up, I would say, hey, look, you know what, when it comes to your business, you need to really start thinking about maybe having a few different bank accounts where you can put aside percentages of, say for example, the GST you collect, or percentage to put aside for tax, percentage to put aside for certain expenses in the business. And what happens there is that when you start putting certain percentages away for the cash that you got coming in is now being broken up to be used for different items, cash flow issues in your business, they can be easily solved just by implementing Profit First. And really, what is Profit First? It's just a system to manage your cash flow. It's a framework, it's a set of rules, principles, whatever you want to call it. But basically what we're doing is we're saying, well, when the cash comes in, how are we going to deal with that cash? What are we going to do with it? And if you are wanting to improve your cash flow, it's one thing to do a forecast, but the next thing you got to do is you need to have a system around where the cash goes and where it comes in. And Profit First works really well in that you don't need to be an accountant, you don't need to be a financial genius to say, hey, when the cash comes in, I'm putting whatever GST I've collected, say for example 10%, is going into another bank account so that when we get to the end of the quarter and your BAS is due, you can pay your BAS in time. Or putting another percentage, like 1% of turnover goes to a profit account, and that profit account could be cash to pay yourself a profit, but it also could be a way of collecting extra cash in the business just in case something goes wrong in the future. So like an emergency sort of fund. But even just saying, hey, if I got a big big bills, say for example for paying employees, you might say, hey, there's of the revenue, if you're a big business and you have, if you're a $2 to $10 million business, you're going to have big payroll. So you want to go, hey, maybe 40% of the revenue you bring in is wages. And a simple way of basically making sure you're always going to pay the employees tax, their wages and super, and their wages just in general, the cash you're paying them every week, fortnight, whatever it might be, putting that 40% aside and just going, hey, that's there for them means that you're not going to have to try and find it. It's really just simplifying it and going, hey, I'm putting cash aside for its intended purpose. So regularly allocating funds and reviewing your cash flow is a great way to go, well, I'm looking at what cash is coming in, and what's happening is basically building a new set of habits, but also discipline for you to actually know what's happening in your business, know where you're spending your cash, and making sure, A, that you bring enough cash in. So if you're having a look at your regularly as a habit every fortnight, or the cash that's coming in, you can go, there's not enough sales coming in, so then you can put pressure on those who owe you money to bring the money in. And because if money's not coming in, you can't, it's a flow-on effect. You can't pay your rent, you can't pay your wages, you can't, there's all these things you cannot pay, which is going to make you fall behind and then make you look really bad and give you a bad credit rating. Profit first is also, in some senses, also a way to forecast and get a really good understanding as to your financial cash position and where you're at. Fixing cash flow, it can be as simple as a few steps. Cash flow doesn't have to be this long, complicated process. There are some really easy, actionable steps that you can take today that can help fix your cash flow in your business. I would say the first thing you want to do is start with some simple profit first processes and systems, right? And I would say, hey, set up 2 bank accounts. It's as simple as a bank account where we're going to put 10% aside of the revenue you collect, the cash that comes into your bank account on a fortnightly basis, just putting in a profit account. And by doing these 2 things, what's happening is you're actually developing a new habit. And you're developing a new healthy habit where every 2 weeks, you're actually getting in there, you're having a look at what cash is in your bank, and you're getting a feel for what's happening, but then it's really just setting up a new system where now you're getting this every fortnight, looking at what's happening in your business, and then just putting the cash aside. The second thing that I want you to do to improve cash flow in your business is have a look at your invoicing. How often are you invoicing? Are you doing it once a month? Are you doing it weekly? Are you doing it daily? Are you not doing it at all? It seems so silly, but there are some of you out there who you might connect with this, where you just put off invoicing for various reasons, whatever it might be. Generally speaking, if you don't do an invoice and you don't send it out, no one's going to pay you. They don't have the ability to pay you. So getting the invoice out regularly is important. But also, it shows that to your customer, your client, that you want to get paid. And if you don't do them regularly, if you get an invoice 6 weeks after you've done the job, the customer, the client are going to say, hey, he doesn't really need the cash. So in their head, they're thinking, well, I don't need to pay it straight away, because they know that you're not going to hound me, you're not going to hassle me to get paid. The other thing I would suggest as well is getting some sort of merchant facility or credit card collection system, or some sort of system where when you do the invoice, you make the payment easier for your customer. Yes, okay, have on your invoice your bank details. Obviously, that's a no-brainer, something you're always going to have. But having the ability for when you send out invoices, and most likely electronically, a link or something where they can pay straight away, or even invite your customers, clients, before you actually engage them and do the work, get their payment details, get their credit card, get permission to maybe do a direct debit once you've done the work, so that then you get paid quicker and sooner. And then you don't have to spend more time and effort into chasing money for work you've already done. The next simple step that you can do, and this will often save you about 20 to 30% of cash in your business going out, is reviewing and cutting unnecessary expenses. I suggest every 3 months you should look at the expenses in your business. And what you want to do is you want to say, hey, is there any subscriptions? Is there any services that I'm no longer using? Can I renegotiate with suppliers to get a better deal? Or what can you do? But having a look at where your money's going and just questioning, can I renegotiate it? Should I cancel it? Should I eliminate the expense? What should I do? But just having knowledge of what's happening there and just asking yourself, is that expense necessary? And should I cut it? The next thing as well is looking at your suppliers. Ask them for better payment terms. So that might be, hey, I get maybe extra time to pay it. Or if I pay on time, can I get a 5% discount? And that's going to improve your profitability over time. 5% doesn't sound like much, but small amounts add up. But just even getting that flexibility, especially when you're doing bigger projects and you know that if, say, for example, you're not going to get paid for 2 or 3 months, being able to say, hey, can I just get better terms so that then you don't have to find the cash to pay for it. The last thing I suggest as well is every fortnight, every month at least, monthly at least, have a look at the cash that's coming in and the cash that's going out. Track it. Have a look and see what's happening. And then what's going to happen is you'll start seeing patterns. Start seeing the patterns of when the cash comes in and patterns where the cash goes out. But have a look at those patterns and ask yourself, can I improve on those patterns? And if we think about the cash coming in, going back to saying, hey, if clients are not paying on time, why is it? Do they just not want to pay me, or is it just that they've got better things to do? But look at these patterns and say, if we look at, say, for example, your debtor days, if your clients are paying within 90 days, how can you get it down to 30 days? What can you do? How can you get it down to 3 days? Or if you got bad payers, having a look at that pattern and saying, look at those customers, I'm not going to give you any more work because you still owe me money from the previous job I've done. So having a few policies and rules around how you deal with that relationship with cash. If your customers are bad payers, how can we get them to be better payers? But it's just having that moment where you're sitting down, you're having a look at it, and you're thinking about it, and then you're putting a system around it. You need to sit down, you need to have a relationship with the cash in your business. If you don't have a relationship, you don't know what's going on. And it's so important as a business owner to know what's happening in your business. You need to know what cash is coming in, what cash is going out. And setting up something like Profit First will give you that ability to understand and have that relationship with money in your business. And ultimately, it's going to lead to better profitability and make you feel better about the relationship you have in your business and remove issues like anxiety and stress about money. Well, guys, that's this week's podcast. Thank you for watching and listening, and look forward to presenting to you next week. See you guys. Bye.